Let me hit that first. Recordings in progress. Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Hoya Locker Room, episode 85, coming to you on a Hoya game day, which is usually, we don't usually post up on game day because, we want to give our attention to the Hoyas. So we're going a little bit early, and this is a special episode. We have a Mr. Steve Martin from 75 to 70, 1975 to 79. We want to thank you for being here, sir. Markham Stansbury is back in the building, my esteemed co-host. This gentleman is one of the founders, helped build the foundation of the Hoya program. His exploits on and off the court speak for themselves. We're looking forward to celebrating him today. But before we delve into him, I'd like to welcome Mr. Stansbury back, give him a chance to say a few words. Can you hear us, Markham?
Been a long time. Can you hear that?
Yeah, we got you.
It's been a long time. Good to be back. Good to be back. I have to say, Steve, you won't understand this because you haven't seen every episode, but I'm so glad Gene didn't say what he always says. Maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
You are jumping the gun.
Okay, well, I won't jump the gun right now. I won't jump the gun because I'm going to get back to it. But I'm extremely happy to have you here because this episode, you continue, Gene, then I'm going to come back in because I know what you're going to say.
Okay, I'm looking forward to this episode. This is going to be our best episode ever. Mr. Martin, again, I spoke earlier about his exploits on and off the court, but what's I think what's most satisfying for me, or what's most important, he broadened the Hoya scope from a national standpoint. Prior to him, there was a gentleman, I want to give him a shout out, Peter Michelle, class of 64 through 67, who was a New Orleans guy. And then 10 years later, Mr. Martin was the second recruit that we ever got out of the state of Louisiana. And to put that in perspective, there were 15 other gentlemen that followed, and they're on the who's of the Hoya list. Dwayne Bryant, Darrell Owens, Joey Brown, Jonathan Edwards, the list goes on and on. But it starts with this gentleman here. He made a major transition in coming onto the hilltop, coming out of St. Augustine High School, an all-boys high school. What he did off the court, I had the pleasure of following after him, and just the stories we heard about how he conducted himself. He was a business major. He set the foundation for what it meant to be a student athlete at Georgetown. And again, I want to thank him for being here. So Markham, if you want to add to that, if not, we're going to jump right into the question.
Well, what I want to say, Steve, is that Gene says this bullshit every week about how this is his favorite episode and we're so happy. And this really is an episode that has me excited. And if you look back through the shows, I don't say that bullshit every week. So I mean it. I don't know if Gene means it or not.
I'm going to give you well, Steve, you can attest to this because you were there prior to me, and the program was just being built, and there were the nuances of the program were even more firmly entrenched, meaning we got $10 meal money, you got $5. We had curfew, you had double curfew, so. So with that being said,
hold on. Let me say why I'm genuinely excited about this episode. I'm genuinely excited about the episode because Steve reached out to Church after seeing me and Church do the episode about Georgetown men's basketball alumni, and that really is that's one of the main reasons why. I came up with the idea to do that because we needed that, and to have that outreach because of Hoya Locker Room was just fabulous. It's fabulous, and that's the first time that's happened. and I love it. Absolutely love it.
So I'll just say this real quick, and then we'll jump into celebrating Steve. The reason why that I say it's my favorite episode, Steve, because I'm not talking to Markham now, because he's not the reason why I say that, Steve, is that I am genuinely, it's heartfelt. I can't believe it's happening. I mean, because again, if you know anything about the program, this is not what we do. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we're celebrating each other is every single time. I mean, the guests obviously matter, but every single time I'm genuinely happy that we're sharing this fellowship and this brotherhood, and I think it's doubly important given what the program is experiencing right now, the challenges of the program right now, because regardless of how you feel about it, something was built, something was established. There's a legacy, there's a history, there's a pride there, and it will continue. So that's where the what he calls bullshit, that's where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. So, well, since you explain it that way, I've
explained it before.
Bullshit, you have never done that. I'll give you that though. And by the way, I don't want to call this a shout out, but I want to just mention my man Billy Kelly, who I grew up with. Who watches, he doesn't always watch live, but he always catches the episode. And while I was gone, he reached out to me and was like, I just want you to know, your boy said this is going to be a great episode because Markham Stansberry is not here.
I'm so glad that message got passed on, Steve. I'm so glad.
So that gave him
I'm glad he passed that on. Humble apology, Steve, because this is all about you. But we just want to get those pleasantries out the way. And we're going to start the way we normally start. Again, coming from New Orleans, you're only second recruit we ever got out of that state. The program was in its infancy, so to speak. Thompson had only been there since 72, 73. What was it like for you coming to the Hilltop? We'll get into the transitions that you had to make. But what was it like for you? Did you know about the program? Did you know about Thompson? What was your recruiting process like for you? And we'll start there.
Okay, so first let me say this.
Gene is so goddamn wordy. All he had to say was, hey, this is how we start off. How did you end up at Georgetown? Mm-hmm. Bam.
I'm glad you missed me, Mark. I'm glad you missed me.
Hey guys. First, I want to say thanks for having me. I have watched some of the episodes just to get a sense of the show, and it's actually very good. So I have enjoyed some of the past series, and what you guys are doing is actually invaluable to the program, and also to get a better understanding about the history, the foundation, and kind of the overall direction. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me. Absolutely. So let me just kind of talk about how I was introduced to Georgetown. Okay. First, to be quite honest with you, as a senior in high school out of New Orleans, Louisiana, I knew nothing at all about Georgetown University. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't even know what a university was. Had no clue, none at all. But this is how it all came about. I went to St. Augustine High School, as Gene mentioned, which is an all-boys Catholic school in New Orleans. And so at the beginning of my senior year, actually, I went to my counselor. He's a priest, Father Fox. I went to him and I said, hey, Father, I need to get ready to go to college. I need to start submitting applications and things like that. That's what folks normally did, looking to, move on to college. So he looks at me and he says, Steve, hold off on the applications. Let's just wait a while. Okay. Now, he's probably a little smarter than what I was at that time. I wasn't thinking about being recruited and things like that. So he said, just hold off for a while if you don't mind. He said, but also do me this favor. He said, if you get calls from any college coaches, he said, come and talk to me about those schools and those coaches. So I say, absolutely. So I did start to get recruited early in my senior year, and also what I want to tell you guys is, Louisiana is a football state, so I grew up really wanting to play football. Okay, one of my older brothers played football, played in the NFL for a couple of years. So I wanted to play football. Now, my high school coach was probably smarter than a lot of people. He wouldn't let me play football. Okay, he just would not let me play football. But also, one of the schools that I really loved was Oklahoma. And I loved Oklahoma because of their football program. Not because of basketball, because of the football program. And I had guys from my high school that was going to Oklahoma. So Oklahoma actually was the first school that really started to recruit me. And I had made up in my mind, I'm going to Oklahoma, no matter what anybody says. That was my thought process, that I was going to
Barry Switzer days.
Barry was there. Yep, exactly. So that was my mindset. I'm going to Oklahoma. So a strange thing happened. So one day I'm in the schoolyard, and one of the football coaches comes out to the schoolyard and gets me. He says, you have a call in the office from this assistant coach from Georgetown. It's like, I don't know nothing about Georgetown, but I went in, I took the call, and actually the call was from Dwight Datcher, who was the assistant coach at that time, and also Bill Stein, who asked me if I'd be interested in coming and visiting the school. I said, well, let me think about it. And I said, let me go and check with a couple of things. So the first person I went and checked with was my high school counselor. Okay. So he was like all over the place. Knew everything about Georgetown, knew everything about John Thompson, and gave me the history. And he said,
Catholic Mafia.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So you say, Steve, promise me one thing, take the trip to Georgetown. He said, just make that promise to me. So I made that promise, to the priest that I would take the trip. As a matter of fact, that was going to be my last trip. And the only reason why I was taking it is because I had made that promise. So I did call back to Coach Stein and Coach Thatcher and said, hey, definitely would like to come up and make the trip. So I made the trip. And
did you say that, or did you say, I'm coming, but I want you to know I'm going to Oklahoma?
I should have said that. So I tell you, so I fly into DC, and Dwight Datcher actually came to pick me up from the airport. Now, also I'd gone on a couple other recruiting trips, and normally when I went on recruiting trips, head coaches would meet me at the airport. Okay, assistant coaches wouldn't meet me, but head coaches, would meet. But Coach Thatcher came to the airport and to get me, introduced himself, brought me to the hotel, and then brought me to the school. Now, also, mind you guys, I didn't even know what John Thompson looked like. Had no clue at all. So I go over to, so Coach Thatcher takes me over to the gymnasium. He said, we're going to meet Coach Thompson. He's going to come over later. So I said, fine. So I'm there with Coach Thatcher, with Coach Stein, and Coach Thompson walks in about 10, 15 minutes later. And really, to my amazement, his size was just, he was huge. He was a huge figure. And that was quite interesting. So he came over to me, shook my hand, and he said, young man, you know how you talk, young man, I heard a lot about you. He said, I'm going to spend the day with you, though. Okay. So I said, okay. So the first place that Coach Thompson took me on campus, we were visiting the campus, first place that he took me was to the library. And we go in the library, and he says, Steve, he said, if you come to Georgetown, he said, if you're not spending your time in the library, you don't belong here. He said, I just want you to know that. This is where you should be spending most of your time. So I said to myself, oh, that's interesting. And then the next place that he took me, because he knew I was interested in business, he took me to the dean of the business school for a meeting. And I sat with the dean for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And again, mind you, this is the first time on a recruiting trip that I had sat with a dean, had gone to the library, anything like that. So I spent some good time with the dean of the business school, asked me my interests, why I was interested in business, accounting, et cetera. So we went through that. And then the third place that Coach Thompson took me, he asked me if I was hungry. And I say, sure, coach. So he said, let me take you to one of my favorite places, and we'll grab something to eat. So he took me to the rib pit. I don't know if you guys know about the rib pit, but it was a barbecue joint. It's up.
Where was that?
Up near 14th Street at the time.
Okay.
And so he takes me to the rib pit. Again, based on my previous experience with recruiting, I had gone to some nice restaurants. Okay.
He took him to the hood, right off of U Street. Right off of U Street.
So we go into to the rib pit, and the place is about maybe 20 by 20 of that. Okay. And look, people are in it. Look, but it smelled good. So we go into the rib pit. So coach looks at me and said, "Let me order for you." I say, okay. So he orders ribs. And so the order comes out in these brown paper bags, greasy paper bags with ribs. Okay. So he says to me, he says, let's go sit in the car and eat. Now, I got to tell you, that was the strangest thing, because again, my experience with recruiting was, I'm sitting at restaurants and,
so let's go in the car. Let's sit in the car.
We sit in his car. And at that time, his car.
I hope it wasn't a white van.
So we sit in his car, and actually we're eating ribs. He gives me the brown paper bag with grease and everything on it, and we are sitting in his car eating ribs. So he says to me, he says, Steve, he said, I've heard a lot of good things about you. He said, I heard you're smart, you're a good player, you're being recruited by a lot of schools. He said, but let me tell you one thing. He said, I want to be quite honest with you. He said, if you come to Georgetown, he said, I can't promise you that you're going to play 1 minute of basketball. I mean, I'm sitting in the car and trust me, I'm a top 100 recruit, okay? And the guy tells me that he can't promise me that I'm going to play 1 minute of basketball, okay? Especially for a school that I never heard of at this point. So I'm like, okay. But he did say this to me. He said, but if you do come to Georgetown, he said, this is what I'm going to promise you. He said, I'm going to promise you that if you do the things that you're supposed to do, you're going to walk out of here with a degree. And that was the first time that I ever heard that from any coach, recruiting me or anything. And when I, when I left DC the next day, my mother came and picked me up from the airport. And the first thing I said to my mother, I'm going to Georgetown. And I went to Georgetown because of Coach Thompson. Didn't know a lot about the school or anything like that, but it was because, he took the time, he understood, he talked about education. He wasn't trying to make promises that he wasn't going to keep. I'd heard a lot from coaches. Hey, you're going to play for me. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. He went straight to it. And it was more about, getting to school, getting your education, and the athletics will take care of itself later. So that's why I went to Georgetown, really because of John Thompson and his approach to recruiting me.
So I got a couple of follow-ups for you, Steve. Number one, you talked about the other recruiting visits. Now, I'm curious what schools you visited. Number one, and number two, I'm curious how long after you got to campus was it before you got called motherfucker?
All of those are great questions. So some of the other schools that were recruiting me at the time, obviously Oklahoma, I had taken the recruiting trip to Oklahoma, and that was a great trip because it was a football school, and they do things a whole lot different at big football schools. I was recruited heavily by LSU, and I just did not have an interest in going to LSU for a lot of other reasons. And
was Dale Brown there then?
Yeah, Dale Brown was there, and I'll say this now, and I said this to Dale years later. I didn't go to LSU because I didn't particularly like Dale Brown at the time. Okay, my perception.
Wow.
Yeah, my perception of Coach Brown was that, hey, it was almost like a basketball factory, bringing kids in, not getting their degrees and stuff like that. But some years later, actually, it was kind of funny. I saw Coach Brown. I was working at the NBA office in New York. He was actually going to visit David Stern, and I saw him walking across the street, and went over, grabbed him for a minute, and we actually had a long conversation, and a very good conversation, and it really talked about his perspective on education and things at that particular point in time. So that gave me a very different perspective of Coach Brown at that time. Tulane, also here in New Orleans, recruited me very hard. That was a possibility that I would go to Tulane. But I had gotten a lot of interest, like I said, probably from about 100 or so schools from around the country. But I just wasn't interested in taking a lot of trips.
Mhm. So since you, before you answer the motherfucker question, you mentioned Tulane.
Excuse me, but I'm worthy. I'm worthy. Okay. Just for the record, I'm worthy.
Before you answer that, does the name Harold Sylvester ring a bell with you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's become a friend of mine.
Okay, Harold. He went to St. Augustine also. Predates me. Was a hell of an athlete, hell of a basketball player. But I know of
first
him.
First black guy to go to Tulane.
Yep, exactly. Yep, I know of him very much. Yeah, he's one of those guys that we all looked up to. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. So now you want to know the answer to your second question, huh?
Yes. Yes.
I already know that. We already know that. As soon as you sign.
well, that is true. As soon as you sign, you take on that verbiage. But it took him about 2 weeks to actually verbally express it to me, and I'm gonna tell you actually, how it came about. So when I went to Georgetown, that was my first time. And let me say this: my recruiting trips were the first time that I had ever been outside of Louisiana. Okay, growing up, New Orleans, we weren't taking summer vacations and things of that nature. So, so I'd never really been outside of Louisiana.
Wasn't getting on no airplanes, baby. We ain't gonna do all of that right there.
Exactly. Yeah. and look, my recruiting trip to Oklahoma was the first time that I had ever flown. Okay. So I was not a worldly person at all at that point. So I get to Georgetown, and Al Dutch was my roommate. And typical, I would say, guys who live in this, the cities that they go to school in. On the weekend they go home. Okay, they get back home. So after a couple of days on campus, going to class and things of that nature, I went to Coach Thompson. I said, Coach, I'm not feeling this. This is just not working out for me. I think I want to go home. So he said, Steve, he said, give it a couple of days and then come back and talk to me. Gave it a couple of days, went to classes again, went back, just not feeling it. Say, Coach, I said, I really, really want to go home. I say, I'm just not feeling, I don't feel good about this right now. So he says, Steve, give it a couple more days, okay, and see what happens. So at that point in time, I go home, I go back to the dorm, and I start calling my mother, I call my brothers, I'm start calling everybody. I'm calling coaches that have recruited me. I'm telling you, I'm ready to get out. I'm absolutely ready to get out. So a couple of days go by, go back to Coach. I say, Coach, said, I gotta go home. I said, I've spoken to my mother, I've spoken to my brothers, and I'm ready to go. So, he took a deep breath, kind of pushed back in the chair like he normally does. And then that's when the MF came out. Okay. But let me tell you what he did. So this is what he did. And this was a real honest talk. He said, Steve, and I'm gonna put it mildly. He said, Steve, he said, you can go home back to New Orleans if you want and hang on your mother's coattail, or you can stay here and become a man. you make a decision. Now, in between was a lot of MFs, okay? but what he was doing, he was challenging me. He was challenging me to take some responsibilities and also to really become a man, take those steps. And I'm the type of person who accepts challenges. Now, after that conversation, and it was a tough conversation, it was not an easy conversation. After that conversation, I left his office with my tail between my legs, eased back up to my dormitory room, and said to myself, I'm not gonna let him beat me. I just said it. I'm not gonna let him beat me. And I made up my mind that I was gonna stick it out. And over my 4 years at Georgetown, I never went home summertime or anything else. I stayed every day throughout the summer class, summer school, the whole 9 yards. But what Coach Thompson recognized at that time, which I didn't recognize, is that I was homesick. It was just that simple. I was just simply homesick. And I didn't know anything about homesickness because I had never been away from home. He didn't sit and tell me that I was homesick. He twisted it and said, hey, it's time for you to become a man. And that was his first challenge to me. And that was my first experience with a lot of MFs that day.
Well, I was taking it all in because, you top 100 recruits, your stories are different than my story because I wasn't a top 100 recruit. But I guess what jumped out at me was, and what I kind of want to touch on a little bit, your family dynamics clearly were strong and clearly were important and clearly defined who you were, which is why you were homesick. What were those conversations like before the MF? And then after the MF, when you were speaking at home, was there somebody at home that said, okay, you made the right decision, or come home, or what were those? Because clearly there was some power and some strength and some direction there.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Gene. Now, I'm the youngest of 8 in my family. Okay, so we have a big family, 4 boys and 4 girls. And I will say, I think my sisters were tougher than my brothers. Okay, so going, and 2 of my brothers had gone on to college, played athletics in college. One played football, one played basketball. My oldest brother, who I probably admire the most, didn't go to college, but, he joined the Army and, went to Vietnam, and, you can look at it 2 different ways, but was honored with a Purple Heart, for the things that he did in Vietnam for the most part. So I had a very strong family background, and I'll mention this also about my family. It was kind of interesting about the dynamics. My mother was a hardcore Martin Luther King fan. My brothers were hardcore Malcolm X fans. Okay. so I'm in the middle as the youngest, but taking it in from both sides also helped me to get stronger. But trying to make that transition when I was considering coming back to New Orleans and leaving Georgetown, I did have a long conversation with my mother. Now, and I will also say this: my father was present in the home, but the women ruled the home. Okay, so the conversation with my mother, and kind of reverting back to the conversation that I had with Coach Thompson. I didn't tell her that he called me an MF because she probably told him I'll come home. Okay.
Been a wrap.
And then having a conversation with with one of my brothers, really kind of got me to settle in for the most part. But that was a difficult time. Those first 30 days at Georgetown was a little difficult. Now, the after that meeting with Coach Thompson. And this was one of the things that I think he was exceptional at. After that meeting, he actually came to campus a couple of times just to visit me. Okay. And he kind of made me go to some of the student activities that were going on campus for the most part. And I think the reason why he did that was to start to get me more engaged in getting out for the most part and kind of starting to expand my horizon. So taking that approach, I thought was extremely good. Now I didn't realize that at the time, but that's what he was doing. So for him to come and really spend that level of time with me outside of basketball, but trying to get me more engaged in, the university as a whole, that also helped my transition.
Markham, I know we go back and forth, but let me just, I want to get into the playing career. Um, so when you arrived, Steve, they were coming off of the Dirk Jackson infamous shot that propelled them into the NCAA. They hadn't been to the NCAA in 30 plus years, 32 years. What was the climate like in practice? What was the feeling around the program? What were the expectations? And your freshman year was, I mean, you took it to another level the next 3 seasons.
Right.
But what were the expectations around the program then?
Well, I have to tell you, that Derek Jackson shot was amazing, and the expectation rose, extremely high. But also, looking at the recruiting class that was coming in with myself and Al Dutch, Al was the best player coming out of DC, and he was probably a top 20 player, in the country. Okay. And then I'm coming in with Al, probably, in the top 100. So, and then we had Tom Skates, and, we had Gary Wilson also, added to that recruiting class. So the expectations really started to grow from the recruiting class and what was accomplished the year before. And practices were hard. Practices were very, very tough. And, in Al Dutch, we were roommates. We were almost playing the same position, so to speak. But, one thing that I learned very quickly, my whole objective when it came to athletics and basketball, my objective was to win, no matter what we did, it was to win. So Al started as a freshman, led the team in scoring as a freshman. And my thing was with Al was I was going to encourage him 1,000% because, as he went, trust me, the team was going. And so I just took it upon myself. Hey, I wasn't playing a lot, but you know what? We got guys who, was out there working hard, producing, and I'm going to encourage this guy 1,000%. I pushed him hard in practice. He was my roommate. I pushed him hard after practice, and that's what we did in support of each other.
Well, you talk about your, playing, not playing out so much initially. What was it like transitioning for you from being a point guard in high school to being a small forward at Georgetown?
Well, it was interesting that transition. So, so the transition to me had to do with both basketball and academics. Okay. So although I came from a very good high school, all boys Catholic high school, I wasn't totally prepared for college. I wasn't prepared for writing papers, understanding the amount of time and commitment that you have to be self-motivated to go out and study. Okay.
Wait a minute. So are you telling me all these people I know from St. Aug who are always trumpeting the great St. Aug experience? Are you telling me it's a fraud?
Look, Malcolm, all I'm telling you is they may have been smarter than me. Okay. It took me a little bit more time to get there, to understand how to get there. But it took me a little time academically. Not that I was an awful student, but it just really took me a little time to understand the commitment that was needed to study, and be self-motivated, and how to study. You study very
Yeah,
differently,
yeah, that's
in
very
high
key.
school, but
Very key.
yeah, but how to study, writing papers. I didn't write a paper in high school. Okay, now I have to write a paper. So all those things were a little difficult, making that transition. And I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. So as a freshman at Georgetown, I actually befriended two guys who were not basketball players. One guy, Lloyd Campbell, Lloyd actually plays football. Funny thing about Lloyd, he was a tight end on the football team, and for 4 years they never threw him a pass. So we always laugh about that.
Wow.
Yeah, and
He was
Reggie.
a line. He was actually a lineman.
Yeah, exactly. He's blocking all the time. And my other friend, Reggie Henry, Reggie he was a computer guy, very, very smart guy. But we took this calculus class our freshman year together. And look, and I'll say this, we're the only three blacks in the class. Okay. So that's how we kind of had this bond. Okay. So we try to study together, get together, things like that. So our first test. So we take our first test, and I'm like looking at this test. You got that blue book. You're trying to write those answers in that blue book, and I know I'm struggling. So after the class, I asked Reggie, asked Laura, I said, "How do y'all think y'all did?" So everybody said, "Oh, we did okay." So the next week when we got those tests back, the professor puts that curve up. He said, well, on the low end of the curve, we had a 65, a 66, and a 67. So we looking at each other trying to figure out who's the 65, the 66, and the 67. But it was a lesson to it was a lesson to us. So that really really got me into understanding how I needed to study. So
Steve, I want you to know, I took that same calculus class, and on the first test, I made an A. The only problem was we covered everything that I had done in my whole year of calculus in high school. It was all downhill from after that.
Look, I definitely understand, totally understand. Now, so I was making that adjustment academically. So from an athletic standpoint, it was also a difficult transition. So you come into Georgetown, although I was highly recruited, everybody's talented. You got Merlin Wilson, who's 6'9", 6'10", who's just a beast. I talked about Al. Obviously, you got Derek. You got Mike Riley, who's, probably one of the best defensive players, ever, for the most part. So one of the first things that I did is to evaluate the guys that was on that team. And how do I fit in? How can I fit in on that team? How can I fit in and contribute to to winning? So that's the first thing that I did. Now, the next thing that happened, which was a good thing, and going back to Coach Thompson, my freshman year, we took a trip down to Davidson to play a scrimmage at Davidson, and we actually took the bus down there. Okay, and I got to play in the scrimmage, but I was like the worst player on the court, the worst, without a question. So on the way back on the bus, and I'm not feeling good about obviously my play, but on the way back from the bus, Coach Thompson was sitting in the back, so he called me and asked me to come and sit with him. So Coach said, "Hey, Steve, in order for you to help this team," he said, "here are the things you need to do." And he actually pulled out a pad and a pencil. And we talked about defense. We talked about, short range jumpers. We talked about getting other players in position. Actually, he sat on that bus with him for the back of that bus for about 20 minutes with him. And he really helped me to understand, what my skills and abilities were in relationship to everybody else and how I could help the team. So once I had that conversation with him, and again, it's still my freshman year, I'm starting to learn, but also I'm learning that, hey, I got a guy like, Felix Yeoman. Felix was like 6'6", probably about 240. How can I compete against him, I'm 6'4", 6'5", all of 175. Okay.
Wide receiver.
I'm still, I don't mean to digress. I'm still trying to figure out how you were going to play football at 6'4", 175. I'm still, but
that's a wide receiver if you got good hands.
There you go.
But he was a different kind of 175 though. He was like thin.
Yeah. So throughout practices and stuff like that, I started to understand now. Also, I've got to get stronger. Okay, I got to get stronger to so I could better, work my skill sets out. For the most part. So I started going to the weight room. Again, I had to be self-motivated. Nobody was beating me upside the head saying, go to the weight room, go do this, et cetera. So I started going to the weight room, lifting and things like that. And it wasn't lifting to gain weight. It was lifting to get stronger because, because when you're out there with folks, it's more about strength more than anything else. So I did all those things my freshman year, kind of learning my teammates better, getting stronger, getting a better sense of my skill set. Had a lot of conversations with Coach Thompson. And then that helped me going into my sophomore year. The summer leading up to my sophomore year, again, I was in DC. I was taking some summer classes. I was working, but I will tell you, every day, after work or whenever I could, I would go to the gym. I was lifting, I was conditioning, and I was just trying to get myself prepared for, I want to contribute. I want to be on the floor, et cetera. But the other thing that I realized, and also, from Coach Thompson, I always told Coach Thompson, I'm going to be the smartest player that you ever had. That's number one. Okay. But he also helped me to realize that I was a pretty good defensive player. Okay. So when I was making that transition from, as we say, point guard to, small forward, and I think I tricked Coach Thompson with this. I got him to let me play more of a point forward than just a forward. Okay, and I
the
think
original Scottie Pippen.
Yeah, and I think that helped us as a team to take the pressure off some of the point guards and some other folks who were looking for shots and who actually needed shots and we needed to get them shots for the most part. So that helped me with that transition. And one of the things I was able to do, especially when we had Sleepy and we had Bebe and Big Sky, is to relieve some of the ball handling pressure off those guys, and then at the same time take on some defensive responsibilities, so they wouldn't have to get worn down, for the most part. So that was an interesting transition. And I'll tell you guys a quick story. My senior year, we were playing Syracuse, ECAC tournament. We needed to beat Syracuse, and we were playing Syracuse. I think we were playing them like in the DC Armory or something like that, Gene. Mm-hmm. And Syracuse has a good team. They were ranked 4 in the country. I think we were ranked 11, 12th or something like that. And look, the starters are playing pretty much every minute of the game, and we're grinding it out with Syracuse. So with about 4 minutes left in the game, I was the guy who inbound the ball, and I normally inbound to Bebe. So I inbound the ball, and I look at Bebe. I'm like, Bebe, give me the ball. Okay. So what we did, and I'm looking at Big John on the sideline, I call a 4-corner, and because we were not going to be running around for the last 4 or 5 minutes, and we didn't have a shot clock at that time, and I felt very comfortable that as the ball handler, I had Sleepy on one wing, I had Baby on the other wing. And if I was able to penetrate and kick out to them, they were going to knock down shots. They were going to knock them down. And in that game, the player—
So John Duran wasn't scared?
No. Look, we had some fearless people. But in that game, the surprise player that stood out, I don't know if you remember this guy, Jeff Bullis.
Yes.
Jeff Bullis.
Yeah.
Yep, Jeff, he positioned himself in the corner, and whenever I got the crack and penetrated and pitched out to him, my first expectation was, okay, Jeff, find Sleepy or find Baby. Jeff knocked down shots that night.
Jeff was a freshman then too, right?
Yeah,
freshman?
he was a freshman. Yep. Yeah, he knocked down big shots that night. So the transition of my skill set and better understanding, I think really played a part in helping us to to win some games. But that was always my goal and objective, is to what do I need to do, to help us win games, and so that's what I did.
So humble self-assessment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put it in perspective, Markham.
Mm-hmm.
Steve was the prototype small forward for Big John. I mean, and I was fortunate enough to play with a gentleman that I think a lot of what you said, Steve, he represented those things as well, Irk Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Both of you guys, 6'5",
mm-hmm.
did everything on the court, were like an Army Swiss knife.
Mm-hmm.
In his junior season, Markham, he finished 4th in scoring, 3rd in rebounding, 2nd in assists. In his senior season, 4th in scoring, 2nd in rebounds, 2nd in assists. There was no way they were winning ball games without this dude.
Well, look,
and he's playing with Sleep and Baby.
Yeah. Look, that helped a whole lot. Let me say that. Look,
when
don't
you say
rule out
second
big
in scoring, don't be like, oh, well, he was second. He was playing with some dudes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, why do you would interject with the dude? But again, in his 4 years there, they were 87 and 29.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I want to say that in the backdrop of what we're going through now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what he was able to establish there, 2 NITs, 2 NCAAs.
Mm-hmm.
And this was as he mentioned, this was pre-Big East.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of kicking in the door, they kicked in the door. But
Sure.
What I want to add to this is a couple questions. How did you feel, and where were you in 1980 when they made it to the Final 8, and what were your feelings like?
Mm-hmm.
And then I also want, because again, you're 1 year removed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then 1982, New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
your hometown,
Mm-hmm.
where were you and what were your feelings?
So I'll answer the first one, 80. I was totally ecstatic. Now, mind you, even after I graduated from Georgetown, I continue to have conversations with Big John. Obviously he's still, recruiting New Orleans, et cetera. So I spoke to Big John a lot, after I left. So totally happy as the program continued to grow and get successful, for the most part. 82, I was in the Superdome. I was in the Superdome. Matter of fact, the funny thing about that is I had gotten a call from Big John, they're in New Orleans, and he said,
we're in Biloxi, Mississippi. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You're in Biloxi.
Hoya paranoia at its finest.
Yeah. So Big John said, he said, I need an extra set of eyes to help to scout, the previous game. I say, Coach, I don't think you really want me to scout anybody, but I did go out and do a little scouting just to help out for a little bit. But the game being in New Orleans, there's no way I was going to miss that opportunity for the most part. But I'm sorry you guys had to stay in Biloxi.
Well, I want to ask a couple of questions. You mentioned about your teammates. You mentioned Mike Riley and his defensive prowess. And when I was there, if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times. Everybody talks about Gene Smith and how he's a defensive. Let me tell you something. Put Mike Riley at the top of the list, skip 3 spaces, then put whoever you want next. Having seen Gene and played with Mike, who's the better defender?
No disrespect to Gene Smith, Mike Riley.
Wow.
Look, I'm telling you, Mike Riley, no matter the size, weight, or whomever, Mike Riley was ready to defend. Now, both of the guys were great one-on-one, face-to-face, defenders, without a question.
Steve, I want to let you know Markham is in heaven right now.
No. Go ahead. You said both of them were great one-on-one defenders.
Yeah. I mean, they could guard guys one-on-one, without a question. I think Mike Riley kind of brought the defensive piece to a little different level, because what Mike would do, he would cover his man, and without somebody else, without one of the teammates asking for help, Mike would be over in a double team without asking for help or anything like that. But he was just, he was just a incredible defender, and those were, again, as I looked at my teammates and I looked at Mike Riley, those are some of the things that I took from him from a defensive standpoint, that, hey, these are some of the things that I need to do. But without a question, he was incredible. Now with Mike Riley, I don't know if you guys remember the old Urban Coalition Summer League.
Yes, the Urbo.
Yeah, up at Dunbar. So I don't know if it was the pleasure of coaching one year or the displeasure, but one year I did coach, and I had just graduated. Coach Thompson asked me to coach the team. Mike Riley was on the team. We're in the playoffs, and John Lucas, he was on the team that we were playing against. So Mike Riley just said, "Don't worry, I got it." I'm like, "Okay, you got it." Okay. So what was the one play that stuck out in my mind and will always stick out in my mind? They inbound the ball to Lucas. Okay, Lucas catches the ball, but he's not facing going in the direct, going up court. He's still, he's in the catch the ball position. Mm-hmm. And I am not exaggerating this. Mike Riley, and John Lucas was not a big guy. He wasn't a tall guy. Mike Riley went underneath between Lucas's legs and stole the ball.
Wow.
Now think about that, Gene.
and just for the record, for people who might not know, John Lucas was not only an All-American in
number one draft pick.
He was the number one overall pick coming out of college.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All-American tennis player, All-American basketball player, a great guy.
So again, he went
under between Lucas's legs, got his hands on the ball as he came between his legs. That's how low he had got, and stole the ball. I do not make that up.
Wow.
Well, for the record, Coach Riley let me know that he was better than me as well. So
okay.
and just to clarify something, Steve, Gene said I was overjoyed when you, with no hesitation, said Mike Riley.
Well, I actually said it in heaven. In heaven.
Gene is actually my favorite perimeter defender. Well, I would say favorite defender, because before I developed my stellar post game at 5'10" and a half, the way I got on the court was playing defense. Mm-hmm. And so, he had a little dog in him. So I kind of modeled myself after that. Mm-hmm. And I never saw Mike Riley. I didn't have the black and white film. And
So, hey, but Mark, I'm going to try to get some now, Marcus.
Now, look, I will tell you, Gene Smith, I'll probably put him second on my list behind Mike Riley.
Well, actually, we skip a couple spots, and I'm like 3 or 4. Right? Quite a Big John. Rest in peace, Big John.
Well, let's say amongst guards, okay? Because you put Patrick in the equation as a center. Yes. That's a little different ball game. But amongst guards, Mike Riley, Gene Smith, without a question.
Well, Steve, you talked about St. Aug, and it's kind of a double question. How in what way did St. Aug help you? Was beneficial as you went to Georgetown Catholic School, and also as you moved into the corporate world? How did Georgetown help you in that area?
Yeah, well, obviously, St. Augustine helped really to establish a foundation for me academically. Although I wasn't totally ready for Georgetown, but it did give me, really some background, some understanding and some history. I just needed to, once I got to Georgetown, I just needed a little push and a little better understanding about some stuff. But when you look at St. Augustine, again, being an all boys Catholic school, the discipline that we had, and not just athletics, throughout the entire school, we didn't wear uniforms, but we wore ties. We wore neckties, and that was the expectation. You had to wear a tie to school every day. There was a high expectation academically. Every year, we had guys, probably 90% of the graduating class was going on to college, on some type of academic scholarships, everywhere from HBCUs to, to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, et cetera. So there's a high value placed on education. And that's one thing, that's one of the things that carry forward with me, to Georgetown. Also, having that priest give me the better understanding that, hey, hold off on doing those applications, and we'll see how some of this other stuff works out for you. All that was great. Now, when I transitioned to Georgetown, it was hard work at Georgetown, and I was 1,000% committed to my education and getting my degree. And as I mentioned earlier, I am the youngest of 8. And of the youngest of 8, and not to be negative about this statement, of the youngest of 8, I'm the only one who has a college degree. Okay, when I went to Georgetown, I was more afraid not to get a degree. Okay, and that's one of the things that drove me to get a degree. But having the support of of some of the guys that I mentioned, like a Reggie Henry or Lloyd Campbell, who was not just, who weren't athletes, but, gave me some support off the court. I had some really good professors. The professors that I could actually go in and talk to. I wrote a paper my senior year. It was the funniest thing. I took a tax course. My degree is accounting. I needed to take this tax course, but we had to write a paper. Now, the other thing about me, growing up, I was a little rebellious, but I wrote a paper on the tax ramification of professional athletes' contracts, and because there are some tax ramifications for depreciating contracts and things like that. So I would do things as a challenge, and to be a little smart ass, to be quite honest with you, also to kind of challenge some of my professors. We had a professor, Dr. Hunter. Dr. Hunter taught geography, and everybody took Dr. Hunter's geography class. All you had to do was show up to class. You would automatically get a C. Okay, that was the thing. No matter athlete, non-athlete, or whatever. Dr. Hunter. So after class one day, I went to Dr. Hunter. I said, Dr. Hunter, I want more than a C. I said, I really would like to get an A out of your class. So he said, okay, if you want more than a C, then you're gonna have to write a paper and you're gonna have to present it in front of the whole class. Okay, so I wrote that paper, I presented it. Well, let me say this, I started presenting it in the class. After about 2 minutes in my presentation, he stopped me. He said, Steve, don't worry, you got your grade. So those challenges like that, I really took them on and really took them, very seriously. And that helped me a lot, academically. Now I'm gonna go back to Big John. Big John also was a huge motivator in me wanting to be successful and being able to deal with the academics, the athletics, et cetera. And the reason why I say he played a role in that is because I had a lot of conversations with Big John that were not basketball related. I mean, we just talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about academics, we talked about careers and, things like that. And I really took a lot in from what he said. And I will tell you, the things that we did from a basketball standpoint, and I had some conversations with Big John. Those basketball things also helped me to understand and to develop leadership skills. Okay, and that was, that was extremely important, because we talked about leadership. Do you have to be a verbal leader? Can you be a quiet leader? How do you motivate? I was listening to the show when you had Eric Smith on, and Eric Smith said Big John treated everybody equally. Well, one thing that I learned about Big John, he didn't treat everybody equally, but he knew how to treat people based on, their skills, ability, and what they could handle mentally. So those are the types of things, from high school to, Georgetown to Coach Thompson, that all, I think, came together and helped me to make the transition into, into the business world.
Steve, we just went over an hour. And we always like to let our guests know, because again, we're so appreciative. We usually do the show on a Sunday, and we know Sunday is usually a family day. So I want to thank you, and I just want to let you know that. We could talk to you all day, but just a couple of things I want to continue with your professional career, because you've had some tremendous jobs, and just how you've been able to navigate, how you showed up on the NBA podium taking first round picks. And I never knew how that happened.
Right.
From being the vice president with the Hornets, from being the account manager with the pension fund when you first got out of school, all those things. If you can touch on those, but I do want to comment on what you said about Big John, what Eric Smith said about Big John treating everyone the same, and how you phrased it, how you broke it down. He knew how to challenge each person individually. What I always appreciated about Coach Thompson was the consequence of an action by an individual was felt by the whole team.
Right.
So when Markham was breaking curfew, we all had to run those sprints.
Yes.
Right? When Markham made shitty Gatorade, we all had to run those sprints.
And you had to drink the Gatorade.
And we had to drink the Gatorade. So that's one thing I just wanted to highlight. That's what I always found. That's what I always appreciated the most. So whatever.
Just for the record, I made the best Gatorade ever. Number one. Number two.
Well, clearly you did.
After my situation with the Cokes, I was scared as hell to break any type of curfew. I ain't never done that. I was telling a friend of mine last night, the one time I cut class, I was in junior high school, and I was so much of a nerd that when I cut class, I went to my algebra teacher's room. That was what I did to cut class.
So just continue. It's just, Steve, you've always been the classiest person. You've always conducted yourself in such a way that, on and off the court. I mean, you're smooth, always eloquent, debonair. How has your professional career, how have you been able to move? You're still at it. You're a commissioner in the NAIA. Just if you can just give us some highlights, and who have you always pushed yourself for? You talked about leadership skills that you've developed over. Just and hopefully some of our youngins will get a chance to peep this later. But if you could touch on that.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would say, don't worry about the time. As long as you guys are good with the time, I'm good with the time. Okay. So I actually have I have an accounting degree from Georgetown, and in my mind, that's what I was going to do. I was going to be an accountant. Okay, that's what I set out to do. Before I graduated, and before it was actually during the first semester of my senior year, the accounting firms were coming on campus to interview students, interviewing them for internships, and also full-time jobs. So, I got me a suit, got me a white shirt, and I'm like, I'm going to interview. Okay. I interviewed, and there was one firm that offered me a position after I graduated, which was Ernst. At that time, it was Ernst and Ernst. Offered me a job as a staff auditor, which was huge, to be offered a position with a big eight accounting firm. That was actually huge. So I accepted that position. And what was actually important to me was they offered me that job before I even graduated. Okay, they offered me that job in January. So I accepted that. So I accepted the job. So I'll tell you something very interesting. So after graduation, I say to myself, I'm going to take the summer off and then I'll get ready, to go to work. After a couple of weeks of staying home doing nothing, I called the partner of the firm and say, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to come to work. So he say, sure, Steve, you can come to start any time that you want. So I started work, and this was actually before the draft. So, days leading up to the draft, I'll get a call from Big John, hey, you're going to probably get drafted, et cetera. I say, okay, because I was working, and at that time I was working 10, 12-hour days. So
no NBA aspiration.
Not really. I figured, my time, kind of had passed and it was time to move on. And I was good with that. I was absolutely good with that. And I had prepared myself, to move on. So the day of the draft, like I said, I work in 10, 12 hours days. I go home and I fall asleep. And then later that evening, my phone starts ringing. And I was getting calls from friends. Oh, you got drafted, et cetera. I said, okay, that's good, but I got to get up and go to work tomorrow. So I get up, I go to work, and I get a call from the partner at the accounting firm. And so I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I didn't submit a good report. So I go into the guy's office, and he says, Steve, he said, I heard you were drafted. He said, if you need to take time off to go to camp or whatever you need to do whatever you need to do. He said, our door is always open to you, if that's what you want to do. So I told the partner in that meeting, I said, look, before I graduated from Georgetown, you guys offered me a job. And my promise to you was that I was going to come and work the job, and I was going to accept the position. And my promise, and the thing I told them, that I would be with them for at least a year. And I told the partner that I made that commitment because you guys made a commitment to me. I'm gonna hold up my end of the commitment. I said, I'm not worried about going to camp. So I didn't go to training camp. I got drafted by the Bullets at that time. So I would get calls from the general manager. Oh, you coming to camp? I'm like, nah, I got to go to work. So that's how I somewhat bypassed and wasn't overly concerned about playing professionally. And then Big John would call me, said, are you interested in playing overseas? He said, I got some people that have some interest. I said, don't worry about it, coach. I said, I'm good. I'm good where I am for the most part. So I started working, in accounting in about a year. And I promised him I would stay a year. About a year after that, I left and I took on a job as manager of accounting at the World's Fair in New Orleans. And that was a big job. I mean, the World's Fair, you probably had about $120, $130 million worth of both revenues, expenses, and things like that. So I was prepared to do that. And as I made transitions career-wise, I would bounce things off of Coach Thompson. There's a couple other people that I knew that also kind of in the business world that I would bounce some things off of. But here's the strangest twist. So I'm back in New Orleans in 83-ish. I came back, I think, in 83, stayed through the World's Fair, 84, 85. So when I moved back to New Orleans, one thing that we didn't have in New Orleans, we did not have a summer basketball league for the college, for the college players. Okay, so
you didn't have an Ergo.
We didn't have an Ergo. That's exactly it. So I took it on to organize, summer basketball league. I still knew most of the college coaches, high school coaches, and stuff like that. So we organized, we organized the summer basketball league, and I got a couple of friends of mine also to come and volunteer to help me. We raised some money and we put it on. So one day I get a call from a guy by the name of Cecil Watkins. Cecil Watkins was the supervisor of referees for the NBA. Cecil called me, and I didn't know him at this time, but he called me. He said, "Hey, I'm coming to New Orleans." He said, "I heard a lot about your summer league down there." So I said, "Sure, come and take a look at it." I didn't know what he was coming to take a look at, but at that time, the NBA was using these summer leagues to help to identify and train, some referees. So Cecil came down, loved the summer league, left New Orleans. About 2 days later, he called me and asked me if I'd be interested in working at the NBA office. I said, "Well, tell me, what does that mean?" So they had a programs manager position there, which the NBA was involved in a lot of these summer leagues, but they needed somebody to come in and really help to manage them and put some structure to them and things like that. So before I took that job, I told him I wasn't interested in the job. And then I called my friend Lloyd Campbell, who lives in New York, and I asked Lloyd, I said, "What do you think about this, Lloyd?" So he gave me some advice. Lloyd said, "Hey, Steve," he said, "you should take the job. And if you don't like the job, you can always go back to accounting."
I'm sorry, Steve. It's not sexy to you. It's sexy in accounting, but
yeah. So that's why I actually took the job with the NBA, and so to make a long story short, so what I learned once you kind of step into that level of corporate world, and you have a lot of opportunities, is don't be afraid to ask for an opportunity. So there's a lot of things going on at the NBA at the time. And NBA didn't have that big 200-person staff. So I'll go to David Stern and ask him if I could do this or if I can get involved in that project. And then one of the things that came up when the NBA was looking to expand globally, and they were looking to open offices in different countries. I had a conversation with David Stern about doing some things in Africa because we had African-born players. We had Manu, we had Dikembe, and and that was very interesting to him. And he eventually said, "Yes, let's come up with a plan and let's move forward for the most part."
So you were the start of NBA Africa?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm over here shaking my head, dog.
Wow.
Now, I got to tell you,
I'm just letting you know, you're going to get a phone call from me after this.
Okay.
Letting you know.
Can it be a three-way?
Now, throughout, and I traveled to Africa, I think 3 years, eventually did 3 years. And it was a great experience. But one of the highlights of the experience in Africa was, I think it was our second year when Nelson Mandela was being released from prison. We had an opportunity to go over there and actually meet with Nelson Mandela and do some things around, his release for the most part. Now that was incredible, to me,
Wow.
for the most part. So, so when you look at, where you are, you're looking for opportunities, and the NBA at that time really had a lot of opportunities, going on. Now, I worked for the NBA for about 14 years, and I was doing a lot of travel domestically and internationally. And, to be quite honest with you guys, I got tired of travel. My son at that point was, I think, maybe 7 or 8. I wanted to, probably spend a little bit more time with him. So I made a decision to start looking for some other opportunities outside of the NBA. And I stumbled on a position at Dillard University as athletic director. Dillard University, small, HBCU in New Orleans, but I saw opportunities and I saw potential. So people thought I was crazy when I accepted the position. But again, I was, from a family standpoint, I thought it was obviously the right move, but also just from a opportunity standpoint. My thing as I work and continue to work is, how do I enhance organizations, programs, how do I make them better? And those are the things that I tried to do. At Dillard, we had only a few programs, but it was my goal and objective to, I'm going to turn this basketball program around, and I'm going to make sure that our student athletes are graduating. And I put that, as high priority, and we were able to do that. So I stayed at Dillard for a couple of years, and then the Hornets, they moved to New Orleans. And the good thing about the Hornets is that they actually came, looking for me, asking me if I would be interested in working for them. The owner and a couple of people that were at the Hornets, they knew me from my days at the NBA. So they were interested in me transitioning with them. Now, I thought it was a great opportunity because now you have an NBA franchise in the city of New Orleans. So I just thought that, opportunities again, and then what can be done, not just from the guys playing basketball on the court, but what that franchise could do for the community of New Orleans, I thought was extremely important. And a lot of what I did with the team had to do with marketing and also community involvement. And I could tell you guys a lot of stories about community involvement and what became successful. Quick story, one program I initiated in New Orleans was with the public schools period. And it was a attendance incentive program. One thing that educators would tell me is that if you can get them to stay in school, we could reach them and we can educate them. Okay, so how do we get them to come to school? So we developed this incentive program, for the kids. We increased perfect attendance up to 98% in the city of New Orleans in public schools. Wow. Okay, in public schools. So and I got some other folks to partner with me. So that was huge to me. So we were really accomplishing, I think, some good things. And the school was the team was firmly entrenched in the city at that particular point in time. And then just like everything else, I'm about opportunities and how do I grow? How do I continue to grow? So that's how I moved in from the Hornets to the NAIA. Then my first commissioner job, which was commissioner of the I'm forgetting, Gene. What was I commissioner of?
The Gulf Coast Athletic Conference.
The Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. I was commissioner, and the reason why I was interested in that position was the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference, NAIA conference, consisted of all HBCUs. Only NAIA conference that had all HBCU schools, and it was important to me to take a look at how can we enhance those HBCU schools. So we were able to do some things, sponsorship dollars and things of that nature to the conference. Again, opportunity, challenge. And then in the role that I'm in now as commissioner of the Mississippi Association of Community Colleges Athletic Conference, Mississippi has 15 community colleges in the state. And I got to tell you, I had never seen anything like this before amongst community colleges. Probably the best community college system in the country. When you go in their campuses, and I lie to you not, they have the athletic facilities are second to none. Football fields all turfed, baseball, softball fields turfed. Great facilities, basketball facilities, unbelievable, dormitories, cafeterias. I mean, they have full campuses, okay? So I looked at it from the standpoint of, what could be done better, okay? And so I saw some opportunities where there's some things that we're doing now. Everything from rebranding the conference, which we've done, restructuring how we actually go about doing business, everything from coaches, committees, et cetera. And now moving our presidents and how we look at sponsorships and things of that nature. So, so throughout my crazy career, I kind of like bring it down to opportunities and challenges. You can't be afraid, to step forward into an opportunity, and you can't back down from a challenge. And trust me, every role that I have always had huge challenges, and it's just been part of my DNA to undertake those challenges. Now, I'll also say this: Big John, he has played a role. Every time I changed the job, I would call him and I would bounce it off him. What do you think about it? And he, he'd give me his honest opinion, and I would take in his information and, then make the decision that I felt I needed to make.
Well, I just got to, I know Gene is itching to jump in here, but I just have to say it is quite pleasurable for me to have someone on Hoya Locker Room who says, what was that place I was commissioner of? Because they've been commissioner of so many places. I just I love that. I love that.
Hey, Mark, it was genuine. It was
But Walker, when I worked for the NBA, and this was also a blessing that I had in having a relationship with David Stern, and some of the advice that that he gave me. One of the first lessons that he gave me, and he didn't have to say this to me. We were just talking one time, and he said, "Steve," he said, "you do great work." He said, "This is what I need you to do. The things that you don't like to do, I need you to do those things better."
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, even as an athlete, okay, if we can't go left, we're gonna try to find a way to go right because
I'm just going to interject here. Big John wasn't trying to get me to shoot more.
No. No.
I hate to crush that, Steve, but he wasn't trying to get me to shoot more.
Well, look, that's the difference between Big John and David Stern. Okay.
Yeah.
But Commissioner Stern helped me to understand from a business perspective and potentially what it would take to be a commissioner at any level for the most part. So those conversations with him were extremely important too.
Did you have any aspirations to be an NBA commissioner or NBA general manager? Given the way he moved through the league.
Yeah, I tell you, I did not, and I don't have a desire to be a general manager. I would love to have been a commissioner at any professional sports league or an assistant commissioner, because I think that's where the decisions are made that changes and shapes the leagues for the most part, even the NCAA, et cetera. So yes, I have thought in those terms, but in terms of being a general manager, look, Malcolm, I spent a year with the Hornets when we only won 19 games. And trust me, only winning 19 games and you have to go to that arena every night is not a good feel.
So you kind of know how Patrick feels now.
Yeah.
I do have one question on the NBA tip. When Big John was thinking about the NBA, because that's kind of like how it moves. You win a national championship, you establish a program, the NBA usually comes knocking. Did you and Coach Thompson have a conversation at all, or?
Absolutely. When the Denver Nuggets were interested in hiring Coach Thompson, we actually had a number of conversations about the Nuggets from an organizational standpoint, from a management standpoint, et cetera. He was very interested, in the job. I don't know if I can tell you the reason why he didn't take it, but I know why he didn't take it. And it really had to do with lack of trust in ownership. Okay, because there was an incident that happened while he was going through the process, and he was ready to take the job, and then once that situation happened, he backed out of it. But we actually had a lot of.
I would love to know what that situation is. Maybe we can talk about that off the.
Yeah, we'll do that offline, okay? But I did have the pleasure of engaging a number of conversations with him, about that job. That was that probably was the better of all the opportunities that he had. Because if he would have taken that job, he probably would have been initially both general manager and coach. And that's where you want to be, because.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because then you've got all the authority to bring in who you want, and obviously you're coaching.
At
But
that time, were there other coaches that had that GM and head coach
had
job?
had a couple.
Had
Yeah,
a
not
couple,
that many. Yeah,
not many, but a couple.
not that many. But but if you're going to take an NBA job at that time, and if you
They,
can,
they certainly didn't have any brothers with that title at that
no,
time.
that's the way you want to shape your title if you can get it, and he could have gotten it, but unfortunately, Big John is Big John, and I understood why he eventually backed out of it for the most part. So. Mm-hmm.
So before we move on, Steve, I just want to apologize for this next round of questioning. I just want to get it out there. I want to apologize. This is Markham's segment.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to take my video off, and I'm going to go on mute. That's right, I did it. I beat you to it, Markham. Yes, I did.
Yeah. So Steve, what I want to know, and because you've been so fabulous, I usually don't give people this option.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the 5 or 12 option.
Mm-hmm.
Either your all-time starters 1 through 5 at Georgetown, or your all-time team where you could put a team together.
Uh-huh.
As I said, Steve, I apologize for this segment.
This is a tough segment.
It's impossible.
Yeah, it really is impossible. But I'm gonna give it a quick run, and trust me, I've never thought about this before.
Of course not. Who does?
Yeah. but I'm gonna start with the obvious, which is Patrick. If I had to take a center, Patrick is gonna be he's gonna be my guy is center. If I had to take a guard, especially a shooting guard, and this probably will ruffle. This will probably cause a lot of people a tailspin. But I would take Sleepy. I would take Sleepy Floyd as as my shooting guard.
That's not gonna cause
any
consternation.
Not a Hoya Locker Room. Not a Hoya Locker Room.
Now this is where it starts to get dicey, okay? when you start to look at the other positions. Now, although I didn't think of him as a power forward, one of the guys that I admired as a forward was actually Billy Martin, and so I would take
Wow.
Billy. Yeah, I would put Billy.
He's gonna love that. Coming from you, no, he's gonna love that.
I wanted to have something to do with the last name.
That last name carries some weight.
Hey, Markham, I'm actually gonna write this down, Markham.
That last name carries some weight. So as we get down to the last two positions, point guard and small forward, I'm going to take as my point guard Michael Jackson. Okay. Michael Jackson is my point guard on my all-time team. Now 3 gets a little dicey because 3 you got gotta do a lot. Gotta do a lot on the Georgetown team is 3. Yep, gotta do a whole lot. Now is that is that a David Wingate? Is that a Reggie? Is that a Steve Martin? I'm not gonna throw myself into that mix. Who would I put as my 3? I gotta tell you, I used to love David Wingate. I thought David was incredible. He could score, he could shoot, he could defend. One year I watched him in the Big East tournament, playing St. John's, and he locked down Chris Mullin. Big Chris Mullin was fixed. Yeah, he just locked him down, and at the same time could score, things like that. So I'll put Wingate as my 3 now.
Well, with that being said, David Wingate, if you were out there, reach out to your former teammate, Gene Smith, or find me, because you have now been placed on the all-time Georgetown team as a small forward and as a power forward by the current president of the Hoya Hoop Club. Clearly knows nothing about basketball.
See, we
Shout out
actually
to
had
Mark
someone
Guerrero.
put Wingate as a power forward.
Is that right?
Okay.
President of the Hoop Club, Steve. Put him at a 4.
Yeah, I don't know about the power in that one.
Yeah, we need to make some changes at the Hoop Club.
Yeah. You know, it was a stretch for me to put Billy Martin at the power forward. So you know I couldn't put David at the power forward.
So, Steve, please tell me you're going to take a pass on the 1 through 12. Please tell me you'll take a pass.
Yeah, I stay with my 5.
Thank you. With that, Steve, man, again, humbleness, gratitude. Thank you so much, man. This has been more than what we could ask for. This is what the whole platform's all about. I mean, you clearly established what we hope to accomplish, what we want to accomplish. Full circle, your journey. We can't thank you enough for ascending to the hilltop. And again, you're one of the triple OGs, and we can't thank you enough.
Well, look, I appreciate that, and I always say that at least one of my give backs to Georgetown and to Coach Thompson was, to help him to find the players in New Orleans. And trust me, I was selfish about that because I thought we had guys from New Orleans that, needed an opportunity to go, someplace else and play. So I was always committed to, to try to help Coach Thompson in those transitions and, and help those guys that, came after me, for the most part.
Well, in helping Coach Thompson, you helped so many more. And I think every place that you've gone, personally and professionally, you've made better. So again, you made us better here.
Appreciate it.
So thank you for that.
Anytime.
Markham, would you like to take us home, please, sir? Thank you.
Yes, this is Steve. I've been doing quotes to close us out, and I usually give one quote, but this is very clearly a 2-quote episode, 2-quote worthy episode. And since you're from New Orleans, we're gonna keep it in the music field. This first one is from Stephanie Mills. Instead of wallowing in my misery, I just made some changes. Stephanie Mills. The second one is from a guy, you mentioned Michael Jackson. I think you were talking about the Michael Jackson from Fairfax as opposed to Gary.
Yeah, that Michael.
This is from Reston. I said Fairfax, Reston. Michael's from Reston, right? This is from the Michael Jackson from Gary's producer, Quincy Jones. Imagine what a harmonious world it could be if every single person, both young and old, shared a little of what he's good at doing. And I thank you for sharing your journey with us today.
Perfect way to close out. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Hoya family. Love you both, and safe travels, and look forward to seeing you guys in person sooner or later.
Oh, Steve, Jen and I have been talking about doing a New Orleans episode.
Okay.
So we will have you back.
Okay. I will enjoy that. Absolutely.
And we will be reaching out to you to connect with some of your former teammates.
Okay.
They're a little bit more elusive than you. So we're going to need your skill set.
We'll do that. Look, I appreciate what you guys are doing. This is a great platform. And as you say, we do need to, integrate more guys and, and continue the legacy and continue to move the program forward. So continue to do what you guys are doing. And whenever you need me, just give me a call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bless.
Thank you.